Hello everyone, I'm Rishi Persad and welcome back to Racing Weekly, a podcast and YouTube show brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. A lot to reflect on from the Aintree Festival in the company of Steve Ryder, as usual, and we welcome back to the show Paul Ferguson. Paul, first of all, your overall impression of the 3 days. Obviously there's some extreme highs, but also some extreme lows.
Yeah, obviously. We'll touch on that in a minute, Rishi. The extreme low point on Friday, obviously a couple of low points on Saturday, but overall, obviously for myself being from Liverpool, it's a big 3 days in the calendar, and I think it showcases the city well, to be honest, not just from a racing perspective. Obviously, it's a big 3 days for the city in terms of generating money and income into the city and things, and the build up to the meeting as well. Be it, I say, living as close as I do to the course, yeah. you get wrapped up in it. I'd say 2 or 3 times a week I'll either walk or drive down Mellon Road, so you're seeing the stands being erected and things, and the hospitality, and so the build up to it. But as for the racing itself, I think this year again we were lucky having that 4-week gap between Cheltenham. I think it's better when it is the 4-week gap. You see, obviously, as we reflect on the racing, there will be some who underperform, but in general, I think it does help fields, and hopefully those can go and perform as they did at Cheltenham. Yeah,
it's more reliable when you have a bit of a gap. So the form that you see at Aintree is more reliable going into next season. But Steve, again, you know, it's not the easiest week for obvious reasons, but there are obviously a lot of things that you can be positive about.
Yeah, it had a slightly different dynamic this year, didn't it? Willie Mullins and Gordon Elliott sent over less horses, obviously with them having the trainers' title between them over in Ireland, and that did lead to a bit more of a Dan Skelton domination than what we've had previously. I thought he came out with loads of credit. Obviously had 6 winners, Grade 1 wins for Mirabad, Bossman Jack and Grey Dawning, and multiple others running well as well. I just want to say about Joseph O'Brien as well, because I mean he's going to have some CV by the end of his training career, isn't he? Both on the flat and over jumps. I mean, he had 7 runners at Aintree, home by the League One, Zeus Power won, and Solness finished 2nd in a Melling as well, and what could have been for Jordan's in the National. So, yeah, just a few things to look forward to next year with regards to obviously the meeting going forward.
And I think Joseph has only got about 25 jumpers in training, is that right?
Yeah, just targets them unbelievably.
Okay, so that's a little chat about what we've just seen up at Aintree, but let's go into a bit more detail in this week's Racing Recap. And the natural place to start is with one of the great sporting events in the world, and that, of course, is the Grand National. And what a performance from I Am Maximus, who has come back, reclaimed his crown, the first horse to do it since the mighty Red Rum. Yep. Tell me about I Am Maximus and where he sits in the pantheon of national winners for you.
I think he's got to be up there. Obviously, it's a different race nowadays than when Red Rum, and even probably 10, 15 years ago. But just what he's done in the 3 years in terms of figures, in 2024 he won off a mark of 159. Last year he was 2nd off 167, and he was only a pound higher when carrying top weight on Saturday. But to win off a mark of 168 kind of just shows you now the type of horse, basically a horse who's almost just below Gold Cup standard is what you're looking for these days. The Irish handicapper gave him a raise of £6. He was actually rated £1 lower in Ireland, so whether that's something to look for going forward. He's currently now rated 173 in Ireland, so you would imagine if he comes back next year, he would probably be up again in the weights. But yeah, and I thought Paul's out and gave him an excellent ride, and once the camera angle changed and you could see him coming into focus after the last, I thought there was a bit of an inevitability about the outcome, really. Strong staying performance. I'd say Rocco ran well as well, because he actually was worse off at the weights from the previous year, where I Am Maximus had only gone up £1. Rocco, by virtue of that win at Ascot earlier in the season, was up 5. So even though John Joe seemed pleased in his interview afterwards, and he was a little bit downbeat in saying that he don't think he's a horse quite at the same level as I Am Maximus, but strictly on the figures, he came out of the race particularly well. And then obviously Jordan's, who Steve's already touched upon, was a big eye catcher for many.
There was so much to talk about. I mean, I don't think Iroko jumped particularly well, particularly on the second circuit. Jordan's obviously given an aggressive ride by Benjamin, but lots to talk about. See, the first thing I want to ask you was, if anybody could have predicted the SP of I Am Maximus before the race, you'd be a genius. I couldn't see that.
I mean, I thought he'd go off favourite, if I'm being honest, but not quite 9-2. And I think based on obviously the lumpy bet we had and the bookmaker trying to get out of that, it could have been even shorter if there'd have been, for example, a false start. But yeah, a fascinating betting heat. And I mean, there was drama from the start, wasn't there? Grange Clare West missing the start. I assume it wasn't by design.
Yeah.
Obviously unseated Patrick Mullins. Then at the second, you lost Caleb Bournemouth. The third, you lost Panic Attack. And I mean, I wasn't on course for National Day, and I was stood there going, "Wow, this is like a Grand National
of old."
Yeah. All the drama. I thought Jaguar was getting into that rhythm that we spoke about last time, and I don't know whether he was losing his place when he fell. It's a bit of a strange camera angle there, but yeah, at that stage I was happy with him during the race as well. But yeah, I Am Maximus is just the horse for a new national, isn't he? He actually lost less lengths jumping this year than what he had done the previous 2 years. 4.22 this year in comparison to 6.83 last year, of 4.39 in 2024. But he's got his own way of jumping, but he never looks like fooling, does he?
No, he doesn't. From the horses that have been beaten, obviously you've mentioned Iroko. Johnny Who has run really well. Jordan's and the ride that Ben Jones gave him. Now, some people have criticised Ben Jones for pressing the button too soon. Do you feel there was an element of that in it? I mean, I think I'm just trying to work out. Immediately after the race, Ben didn't mention anything at all about it. But I think subsequently he's thought maybe he has. Anything in that?
Yeah, I did think he went a little bit. And I think a contributing factor was slightly before that as well. He was obviously held up by the early fall. I think he was hampered by Jerry Colomb, wasn't he? I think it was the 13th fence watching it back. And he was pretty much backing on the inside throughout. But I thought he made a big move. I think it was between 5 out and 4 out when he pulled him out. And I think that was probably as much a contributing factor to pressing the button off the home turn, because he must have used a lot of gas up, I thought. I think really, probably in hindsight, if he'd have sat and just taken the patient approach. But it's easier said than done, isn't it? But as you said, I think when I got home and I was watching it back on Sunday morning and I seen the interviews, he as you say, he didn't really reflect on it all, but I think he done an interview with Sport and Life yesterday, and in hindsight said maybe he should have held on to him. As I was watching it live, I turned to the person next to me and did say off the home turn, I think he's gone early, and I think that in the end possibly has cost him. Well, I don't know, I Am Maximus might have run him down anyway, but I think it certainly detracted from his chance. He went up £5 incidentally, so his Irish rating is now 152 again. So, but he's only a 7-year-old, so it could be improvements as he comes back. You see him from Iroko from 7 to 8 last year, so I would imagine he finished second in the Malmö last year as well. So he obviously goes well at Aintree. So you would imagine that if he was mine anyway, his season would be geared around coming back to Aintree next year.
Yeah. He's 16-1 for the national next year. I mean, your view on that, Steve, and anything else from the race that you wanted to pick up on?
Yeah, I agree largely with Paul. When you pull out and you get a bit of clear air, there are times where a horse just completely lights up. And I don't think it was that move that really lost in the race, but he just kept going forward. I thought he could have at that point then, in theory, steadied it down, but not push again round in the bend. I didn't have a problem with him making headway, because that does sometimes happen. You see that in handicap chases every day. As soon as a horse gets a bit of daylight, they then start jumping better and then taking their way through the fields. But yeah, in hindsight, just went a bit early, and you can completely understand why the adrenaline would have been up. He thought he was about to win the national. Noel Feely did it on Black Lion, and think how experienced he was at that stage.
For the Grand National 2027 with Bet365, I'm Maximus 12-1 favourite, Iroko 16s, Jordan 16s, Soldier in Milan 16s, Jaguar 20s, Grange Clare West 25s, Johnny Who 25s, along with Kisswell. 33-1 Barton Snow, who we'll obviously touch on maybe a little bit later on in the show. Anything appeal to you now for if you wanted to look into your crystal ball of the Grand National?
I would imagine that Jordans will be campaigned with the race in mind. You've touched on Soldier in Milan there, obviously won the Irish National. He went up £15 in Ireland, so he's now 157. You did get people on Easter Monday saying, why didn't he run it? Well, he wouldn't have got in at Aintree basically off 142. He might have been a couple of pound higher over here, but he wouldn't have got in this year. So you would imagine again that he will be aimed towards Aintree and will be a likely candidate. But I think I can hold off at those prices.
Anything, Steve?
Soldier in Milan would be the one that I'd look at long term, but it's with Emmett Mullins, you have no idea how they're going to be campaigning, do you?
No, if only we knew how different that will be. Okay, well, that wrap up the Grand National. Let's talk about some of the other feature races from Aintree. And starting on Thursday with the anniversary juvenile hurdle, Manche 2 beat Selma de Vary. Obviously, Manche 2 missed the festival. Selma de Vary ran at the festival. I thought she ran very well in defeat at Aintree. What did you think of it?
Yeah, it was an interesting race to watch. It ran at a strong pace. Every runner finished a speed percentage of less than 100%, which says it all, really. As I said last week, I do think we've got a good bunch of juveniles this year. Yes, Indian River has finished third, but that was 3.5 lengths back behind Manche 2 and Selma de Vary. I think the horse to come out of this with his reputation boosted is Narciso Haas once again. I mean, he's going to be an exciting horse next season with whatever they do. But they're both strong travelling mares. You would question now with the mares hurdle moving to the Thursday on the new course whether 2.5 miles on that new course would suit either of those. So it's going to be interesting to see how they're both campaigned. I can't see Gordon Elliott resisting the temptation to not run Manche 2 early on next season. So I imagine he'll have the normal campaign for a Gordon Elliott horse. But it's going to be interesting to see what Willie Mullins does with Selma de Vary. The last couple of good juvenile fillies that he's had, Cargeese didn't see until after Christmas, one run, county hurdle. Mercia, again, from this race last year, one run, county hurdle. If there's a race for her, big field, settling, coming through, should still be well handicapped off the back of it. I would say Selma de Vary for the county hurdle would be one of my main anti-post bets.
I 100% endorse that, as you know. For the mares hurdle, next Cheltenham Festival, Manche 2 16, Selma de Vary 20s. But as you mentioned, the 2.5 mile on the Thursday, not so, you imagine, in favour of them. What did you make of the race?
Similar to Steve, really. I'd have question marks about them both going up in trip at this stage. Obviously, Manche 2's bred to get it in time. She's half-sister to Imperial Pass, so she is bred to stay. But like you said, both of them are a shade keen at the minute, so whether they'd be going down that route. The race I had in my notes again for Selma de Vary was likely possible county hurdle contender. Just on the basis of the way Willie has trained, the two that Steve mentioned in the past 2 years, Cargeese and Mercia. It does seem to be his way now as well with the second season. The season after their juvenile, that he's quite light on and quite easy on them in the early part, and I would imagine that would be something similar. Neither of them actually got an Irish handicap mark prior to the race. The BHA give them a mark of 138. I can't imagine that would change too much. Indian River was obviously had been put up today, £8 to a mark of 135 for his good run in behind. But again, I'd just say I did think Maestro Conti probably is better than he showed there. I thought he flattened out, and certainly Manila Study was one who I didn't think ran any sort of race, which I was quite surprised with, really, because he hadn't had a run from the December meeting, I think, till the festival. So I was actually expecting him to step forward, if anything, at Aintree, and possibly was thinking part of the reason he faded late on or was caught in the triumph was that lack of a recent run. So I was slightly disappointed with him, but I imagine he'll be given a break now and then maybe revert to the flat off an attractive mark.
I was also disappointed with dear old Winston Jr., who I thought had a lovely position through the race, and he then got stuck on the inside and then didn't do anything, just sort of flattened out. Better to come next season. The Manifesto Novices Chase. Well, this show last week was the sort of the altar of Cocktail Divan. So a couple of people here were, Ed and Steve, very keen on Cocktail Divan. Blue King Daru obviously in behind in the Manifesto. But I'll start with you here, and normally we start with the winner, but what about Lulamba? What do you think happened to him, and where do you see the future for Lulamba?
I thought it was an unfortunate incident, really. He didn't really seem to make a mistake. He seemed to land okay and then stumble after the fence. In terms of his future going forward, I would think he's still only 5, so talk of King George, I would have thought might be a little bit premature at this stage. I would think, if he was mine anyway, I'd be looking possibly to stay over an intermediate trip just for the time being, given his age. And I think it'd probably be a case of trying to get him back on track with the start of next season. But it's one mistake as a novice, you can't. I know his jumping earlier in the season was questioned, but you say he's a 5-year-old novice, and I wouldn't be too critical of him personally. Cocktail Divan, I thought he had optimum conditions, really, on a flat track, decent ground over an intermediate trip. He obviously didn't stay earlier in the season. And again, in the Broadway, so you would imagine that he would be campaigned with the Ryanair in mind, I would have thought. But I actually thought he's probably better than he showed there. I wasn't blown away by the performance, given that Lulambo was out of the race. Possible at Blue King Daru put up, I would say that was his best performance today to offences. He previously hadn't matched his hurdles form as a chaser, but I'd say it was more of a workman-like performance from Cocktail Divan than anything that blew you away. But I definitely think he's capable of better going forward next season.
I'm less forgiving with Lulambo than Paul is, because there's 2 championship meetings, Cheltenham and Aintree, which is obviously the defining moments. One was a crucial mistake at Cheltenham, and another, admittedly, he didn't jump it terribly, but another mistake. So for me, he's got to improve his jumping enormously to be a championship horse next season on whatever trip. But I know you want to probably give some dues to the winner more than anything else.
I do, yeah. Just touching on Lambo. I mean, in his first 3 chase starts, he was just a bit up and down. He wasn't quick away, and then Nico asked him for a big one at the second last when he was trying to make that move in between Kopek de Board and Cargeese, and that was the first real mistake that he'd actually made. And I think that probably just in the back of his head. He just needs a summer off and come back next year, like Paul said, a 5-year-old. Yeah. You can forgive him that. Cocktail Divan, I imagine next year will be tried. Well, we'll start off in the John Durkan, would be a logical space, I think, for him to start. And then it's just going to be interesting to see whether they go down that 3-mile route again, the Savills, the Irish Gold Cup, and then drop back for the Ryanair. Because I do think the Ryanair is the race for him. But again, he could well progress. And as Fact of Heart, I suppose, has shown, just because you don't stay once doesn't mean that you can't actually stay in the future.
Yeah, you imagine he might go to Leopardstown at Christmas, and then it's often Henry's way then, isn't it, to be then freshened up and you don't see him again till Cheltenham. So.
Yeah, I think Mambo number 5 is one to take out of the race, because I thought he loomed up like a big threat. This was his first try over 2.5 miles. I'd imagine a drop back to 2 miles will be the way to go. His most impressive performance this season came in the Wayward Lad. I imagine the Desert Orchid would be a logical target for him. I know that's now technically a handicap, but at that meeting at Kempton, 2 miles, I'd say that would be where I think he wants. I did think he wanted the trip. Whether he didn't fully say, I agree with you. He loomed up 2 out like a danger. Again, he's only a 5-year-old. It's not easy in these level weight contests to this. We've seen the record in the Arkle, and the record in that's not great, to be fair. No. I think there's only been one 5-year-old, Clark, I think won it for Gordon a few years ago in Jigginstown. I'd be forgiving a Mambo number 5 again. He's been left on the same mark. You'd imagine you might even consider a decent handicap with him early next season off 146. But I think he'll get the 2.5 trip, no problem. And it might be again that he was a little on the weak side.
For the Ryanair next year, Bet365, Lulambo's actually 15-2 and Cocktail Divan 16-1, if that's the route that both those horses head down, for which Fact to File remains the 4-1 favourite. We'll talk about another horse in the market for that, Grey Dawning, in a little bit, 8-1 for the Ryanair next year. But let's talk about the bowl, in which most people would have expected to see a Grey Dawning. He didn't go there. He went down in trip. But Django Bay beat Protectorat. Now, Django Bay obviously was challenged by Impera Pass late on. Impera Pass came down. Did you feel that Django Bay had Impera Pass covered?
I think it would have been a brilliant race to finish. They are 2 completely different riding styles, Nico de Boinville and Paul Townend. So just because Nico de Boinville looks as if he's going through the motions on Django Bay doesn't mean that Impera Pass would have won because Paul hadn't moved. I mean, he took off a mile off, didn't he? Impera Pass astride too early and came down, and thankfully got up okay afterwards. But yeah, I don't think Django Bay was a less likely winner than Impera Pass. I haven't actually checked the exchanges to see what sort of prices they were in the end. A 16-length winning margin is obviously flattered for him, but next year he's going to come back and hopefully go one better in the Gold Cup.
Yeah, he's 7-1 with Bet365 for the Gold Cup. What did you make of the race? Were you in agreement that Django Bay still probably had the edge?
Yeah, I thought he was just about still on top. I did think he was, but we don't really know. We have still no evidence of Impera Pass's stamina. The only other time he tried 3 miles, he only got as far as the first, didn't he? Punchestown last year, I think it was first or second. So he was going into unknown territory, really. He did loom up large, and it was good to see him bounce back, really, because it was a bit of a lacklustre performance from him at Cheltenham, which is a bit uncharacteristic of the horse. But I actually thought Django Bay looks like he's turned into a proper stayer now. He was like off the bridle a couple of times. I was actually in the watching from the course, as they went out, and that's twice he went past. He was being ridden away from.
But then he came back on the bridle.
Yeah, he came back. So he is starting to race like an out-and-out stayer now, I think. And if you'd have forced me, I'd have said, yeah, he was probably still just about on top.
Okay.
I think, I should have said that what we touched on with the 4-week gap, I think that's a significant race in terms of the bowl. He's the 4th Cheltenham Gold Cup runner-up to win the bowl in the century, and all 4 of them, because some horses don't have a great record in that race, but all 4 of them won when there was a 4-week gap as opposed to a 3-week gap. So I think obviously when you're dragging out the stamina horses, I think that extra week is probably more significant than the 2-milers.
Yeah, very good point indeed. The Aintree Hurdle is a race that I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on. Brighter Days Ahead beat the New Line. Obviously the New Line made a mistake at the last.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that cost him victory. And she remains just a really admirable, likeable mare.
Yeah, she is, and I'd hold my hands up. I got that race wrong. I thought I'd have been keen to have been against the last week in the fact that just the makeup of the race, I thought it would set up as it did, and she'd be almost forced to make the move first. And I thought she might have just carried not just the New Lion, but Golden Ace and Alexi into the race. But to be able to do that and carry on up the home straight, having made the first move, it's not easy at Aintree. On decent ground, so credit to her there. Obviously she was a course and distance winner, having won the Mersey a couple of years earlier, and I thought it was a commendable performance. I thought at the time, first glance, maybe it made an impact, but watching it back, I think she had the New Lion beaten anyway. I think so. I think she was more than a worthy winner. What they do with the New Lion now is open debate. Obviously
he's 8-1 favourite for the stairs with Bet365. Is that a route that you think is worth pursuing?
I think he should try it. I don't envisage him going chasing. Obviously, I think there's already been talk of Cabral de Mat, and we might see it Sandown next week going over fences. I would imagine the New Lion will stay hurdling, and I think on the evidence we've seen this season, he doesn't look quick enough to win a champion hurdle, so trying the stayer seems the obvious route to go. Looking at his pedigree, Katira's his half-sister. I don't think she truly stays 3 miles. She just about gets to the tracks like she's won. I think she won a mare's race at Kempton. Obviously in lesser company. Half-brother El Presente did get it, but at a much lower level, obviously in handicaps, when trained by Kim Bailey on quick ground. So pedigree wouldn't assure you of it, but I think he's certainly worth a try at it next season, because when we get onto the staying hurdle division, that is one that could do with a bit of fresh blood in there.
I'd like to see the old boys, to be fair in that. Your thoughts on the race? And then where do you see the future for the New Line?
It just shows how good Lottymouth is. 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th in the champion hurdle, finished 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th in this race. Remarkable really. I thought Jack was really clever on her, because didn't let Potter's Charm get an easy lead, put pressure on rounding, and then came across, which made Sam Twiston-Davis move out, which then put Harry Skelton in a pocket. And I know Harry Skelton got a bit of criticism for the way that he rode the New Lion, but that was because of how Jack Kennedy has ridden. It's a joy to watch him versus Paul Townend in Ireland most weeks. They do it in maiden hurdles all the time, and to see him do it over here to one of the best jockeys over in the UK was good. And she's just really good, isn't she? It was interesting. I was stood next to Michael O'Leary in Cheltenham when he was interviewed by Lydia Hislop after finishing 2nd in the champion hurdle. We're going chasing next year. And then Gordon Elliott then said, I wouldn't mind keeping her over hurdles. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do.
They've already had the same conversation, hasn't he? He again, immediately after the race, it was she's going chasing, and was Gordon on Nick on Look on? It was either Nick's podcast or on Look on Sunday. He said she'll stay over hurdles and 2.5 miles a trip. So I think that's already hinting that she won't go back for the champion hurdle. So she's probably down the mare's hurdle route, or even. I would imagine then he's probably going to have to split up Ayr and Woodoo, maybe. Yeah,
because it's going to be interesting to see where she runs at Punchestown as well, because she's got the entry in the 2-mile champion hurdle and the 2.5 mile mare's champion hurdle.
You'd imagine they'd want to avoid
Lottymouth, but then you've also got Woodoo, who obviously missed Aintree as well for one of those races. So it's going to be fascinating at Punchestown and next season.
And New Line for you next season?
I do think you've got question marks surrounding him now.
Yeah? Okay.
Although it's, like Paul said, it's good to have new blood coming in. There might just be other new blood that I prefer to back at bigger prices than him.
Friday's racing at Aintree. We'll start off with the race that sort of overshadowed everything, ultimately sort of overshadowed the meeting a little bit, and that was Gold Dancer, who made that mistake at the last fence in the Mildmay Novices Chase, ended up beating Regent Stroll. But immediately after crossing the line, when the horse slowed down, Paul Townend jumped off. He was lame, suffered a pelvic injury, I believe, and was sadly put down in the immediate aftermath. I mean, it's caused a lot of controversy. People talking about Paul Townend, criticism for him, criticism for the way it was dealt with by the BHA and what they said afterwards. You know, I think it's an impossible thing to get absolutely right. So I don't want to hold anyone to account. Could anyone have done anything better on the occasion?
Possibly speed of communication might have been something that could be improved. I think the criticism of Paul Townend is so harsh, because you've got a horse that's coming to win a Grade 1 that makes a mistake, which would have brought his adrenaline up. Riding horses in canter is so much more difficult to obtain if a horse is lame in comparison to trot. As soon as a horse is lame in trot, you know exactly straight away. And at the same time, this is adrenaline racing after nearly throwing away a Grade 1 after the last. I thought the comments made around Paul Townend were ridiculous, to be completely honest. And a lot of things happen in horse racing. You think you can learn from it. I would say it's going to be years until we ever see anything like this ever again, because it's just one of those scenarios. I mean, you look back, Gin Online made a bad mistake at Cheltenham one day under Rachel, didn't he? Corto Star unseated Ruby, who hopped back on to then win a race.
Corto Star suffered a serious injury that kept him off the track for a long time.
But we're talking about 3 times in the last however many years.
Didn't that result in the rule changing as well, of not being able to remount in races, which is fair enough. But I think it's difficult to ascertain. I can't imagine. I haven't ridden, but I can't imagine. It's like you said, it's easy for a jockey to ascertain that injury at that situation. Was what I thought, and I thought that the criticism of Paul was pretty harsh myself, to be fair. Especially, I imagine as well, coming over the last, he's got such more forward momentum. Like you say, it's not like he's trotting and he's back in the saddle. So,
and it's also an injury behind. Like, that's so much more difficult to feel as opposed to an injury in front.
Yeah, I'm in agreement that I think any criticism of Paul Townend. First of all, the instinct of a rider, like you mentioned the Gin Online incident. Yeah. You know, when that horse went down, Rachel Blackmore, my Drogo fell at the same fence.
Independently, didn't he?
And when Gin Online went down, Rachel's instinct was to stay on and keep going. Yeah. She didn't stay on, check whether the horse was okay before it kept going. She stayed on. Basically, the horse got back up and she pressed on. It's that instinct in competition. I think it's really difficult for people to, really harsh for people to criticise Paul Townend on it. Yeah. And also the medical aspect of it, you know, they were clear. And it's not just James Given in the BHA. There were other vets who observed the incident, saying that in the canter, which the horse got into, or the gallop as far as he's concerned, it's harder to ascertain the injury as opposed to when the horse slows down, as Steve's saying. So that's medical as well. Yet people were criticising them for saying they're trying to, you know, hide the fact that this is the situation. I mean, I know there's obviously conspiracy theories and all that sort of stuff, but I think it was such a difficult situation, and people are looking for people to blame. But in this incident, there's really no one to blame other than a tragic set of circumstances.
Yeah, that's right. It was just a desperately sad and most unfortunate situation, is the way I read it. But yeah, difficult. It did mar certainly the early part of the day on Friday, and the day throughout it was a little bit sombre after it. But I say, unfortunately, we do get the odd incident from time to time. But like Steve said, we've just 3 in how many years of similar events which we know in it, which weren't as tragic, obviously. So hopefully we won't see that kind of thing again.
No. But one point I really want to make is what Steve said about communication. Like the speed of communication on racecourses, whoever is involved, whether it's the BHA and the racecourses, it's actually so disappointing that after I've been in racing, working in racing for 23 years, it's not got better in that time. In fact, it's got worse. And if you're a viewer or a race goer or anybody who's interested in the sport and you care about the horses, it's almost disrespectful in the length of time it takes you to inform you about things that you're watching and you care about. But 'twas ever thus. The top novices hurdle on the same day.
Can I just discuss the actual race? But like Regent Stroll, I thought came out of that with loads of credit. You touched on the 3 miles is his trip. It's definitely his trip.
Yeah.
I mean, he's grown up so much this season. Actually settled really well. Finished 6.5 lengths ahead of Sauber, who finished third. He was beaten only 3 lengths in the Brown Advisory. So we could look back at this race and actually think it's a good piece of form. I looked at Regent Stroll. He's 100 to 1 with Bet365 for the King George. For a trainer who's won the race, 13 times, I thought that was a massive price for a horse who now settled and obviously will then be looking at targeting the race. Yes, it's going to be a strong renewal, but I thought you could have worse bets at triple figures than Regent Stroll for the King George next year.
I expect him to improve physically as well. He's quite a cumbersome individual still. So, anything else you want to take out of that?
No, I'd imagine he'd still start in a handicap. He went up £4 today to 149, so he'll have the likes of the Paddy Power and maybe the Coral Gold Cup as options in the early part of the season before you start looking at open grade ones. But he's definitely developing into a stage, racing more professionally as he gets older. So.
Yeah. I mentioned this top novices hurdle, memorable day for Neil King, first grade 1 victory, very emotional for him with Storming George, who showed a tremendous attitude to win that race.
He did, yeah. Quite what the form ends up turning out to be remains to be seen, but say first grade 1, and Steve touched on Joseph O'Brien's excellent record. The Neil King only had 3 runners, and one of the others was Lookaway, who ran really well on the Saturday. So credit to you there. His horse in really good form. He had a couple of winners on the all-weather I noticed the other day as well. So his horses are going well. He's gone up £13 now to mark a 144. Would imagine he'll go novice chasing next season. Sober Glory in behind would be one I was disappointed with on the week again, probably. The way he goes through his races, in hindsight, maybe he's one who's a little bit hard on himself, so perhaps he just left that run behind. But in previous years, horses who've run well in the Supreme have an excellent record at Aintree. So again, whether that has an impact on what they do going forward, because there was talk, wasn't there, initially he was going chasing, then he said if he went and won at Aintree, he might go down a champion hurdle route, whether that has an impact. I think if he's going to end up a grade 1 horse next season, I said more likely I would think it would be as a novice chaser personally.
Philip Hobbs said just before the race that almost regardless, the instinct, because of how he looks and pedigree,
physically
to go chasing with Sober Glory, who's, Paul says, puts a dampener on the form, but not on the occasion.
Yeah, so he was just a bit flat, wasn't he? Normally exuberant in front, and Sinatra obviously kept him honest up the inside, never got an easy lead. But yeah, I just thought he was flat after Cheltenham. He's one of these horses that I just think you can say he left his race at Cheltenham, despite there being a longer gap. Storming George was obviously well regarded, sent off 17 to 2 for the Formby earlier on in the season. Got a confidence booster in a novice handicap hurdle off a mark of 125 last time. So it was a superb bit of training performance by Neil King. But yeah, you just slightly raised the question marks about the form.
What about the form of the Melling Chase, which went the way of Grey Dawning, who got the better of Solness, who ran a mighty race, I thought, in second. Hartwood, the Ryder winner, back in third, but Grey Dawning down in trip, cheek pieces, travelled well again. Yeah,
and jumped really well. I thought Harry Skelton particularly was excellent on him at the last, asked for a big one, and yeah, the decision to put cheek pieces on sparked him up over the trip. Pair pulled 11 lengths clear of Hartwood, who again I think is probably one who's feeling the effects of an impressive win in the Ryanair chase. I wasn't expecting to see that from Solness either over that trip. Maybe it was the flat track that has done that, but Solness is just a bit of a quirky individual. you think that he loves Leopardstown, and then the time at the Dublin Racing Festival just never ever going. So yeah, I think Solness is now getting into, well, if I was working for Timeform, I might put in a squiggle next to his name.
I think the ground's important to Solness. I do think he likes nice ground, and he probably, as you say, the flat track and being able to boss it a little bit, I think probably contributed towards his good performance in second.
Great Dawning's 8 to 1 for the Ryanair next year with Bet365. What did you make of his performance?
Yeah, it was a good performance. Again, I thought he might, if Hartwood turned up, I thought he would have struggled to have the pace of Hartwood personally, dropping back with so much experience now. But it was a good performance. Say his first time cheek pieces obviously helped in that regard, probably helped light him up. I'd agree. I thought Harry gave him a good ride. The Ryanair is sure to be the aim next year. I wouldn't imagine they're going to go to the Gold Cup again, but both him and Django Bay, I suppose, give the Gold Cup form a bit of a boost anyway on back-to-back days. But yeah, again, I agreed. Solness ran well in second. As I say, I think ground is important to him. I think he's better on a sounder surface. And Hartwood, again, my notes are he seems to be flat after Cheltenham, so which was a little bit disappointing because I was looking forward to seeing him because I think he is at his best on over an intermediate trip. He doesn't quite fully see out the 3 mile trip. So, but again, I think you can forgive him that after the season he's had.
I'll stay with you for the Sefton. We've spoken about the trainer already a few times. The Zeus Power beat Kachin Savo, first 5-year-old to win it since, say, R, who obviously turned into a bit of a Grand National specialist further down the line. Yeah,
it's difficult for a 5-year-old as well. I always think, even the bit at Cheltenham, you've got to be good to win the bit in Bingham as a 5-year-old, never mind the Albert Bartlett, and it's similar in the Sefton. So good performance, stepping up in trip, and he stayed really strongly because he made a mistake. I think it was 3 out, and then again at the last
he made a mistake at quite a few.
Yeah, he wasn't fluent, was he? So, but he was well on top at the end. Again, I wouldn't say you could question the form somewhat because Johnny Story was beaten, but I think it's difficult for Albert Bartlett horses to come, and that's now the record in that race is 9 Albert Bartlett winners have tried to win the Sefton and only 2 have succeeded. I actually thought it was a decent run in third because I think that probably on the sharper track and under quicker conditions, he looks an out-and-out stayer. I know his form before Cheltenham was over much shorter, but he does look a proper stayer. So I would imagine now that he will go chasing, whereas Zeus Power, I would think, will remain over hurdles, and he could be one that enters the stayers hurdle picture going forward. Kachin Savo was a little bit frustrating in second for me. I was quite keen on him before the meeting for a handicap. He was only rated 126. Obviously ran a huge race. He's gone up £16 today to 142. But prior to that, he was 2 from 4 over hurdles, but it was his Punchestown Festival bumper third that was the strongest piece of form he had on offer. He was third behind Soldier in Milan and King at Rascal Grey at the festival last year. So you could say that bumper's worked out pretty well.
I quite liked, I know you mentioned Johnny's Jury going over fence. I quite liked him over hurdles, staying over the stairs. So obviously I think he's better suited by Cheltenham than he is Aintree. It just got away from him at Aintree, but he finished off well. And then I was looking at the market for stayers hurdle next year, and I'm just thinking, British horses wise, there's only the New Lion who's higher than him in the market at 8-1. After that, it's Jasmine Devoe, Tiapu, Wudu, Zeus Power, Home by the Lee. Alexi's the next horse, but I couldn't believe that Alexi was even in that market. And then after that, you've even got Dr. Steinberg, King Rasco, Grey Bob, Bollinger, Honesty Policy, Carol de Matin, who's I don't think he's going to end up in the stayers hurdle ever again.
I'm sure King Rasco Grey won't end up there neither, will he? So.
Yeah. I'm just thinking he could stay down the hurdling route, certainly clean up here, because there's nothing. And then there's, as you saying, we'll talk about it in a minute, but there's fresh blood needed.
Yeah. The only thing is he's 6 to rise, and he'll be turning 7 already. So if Jamie Snowden does regard him as a chaser, that's the time to go chasing now. But it depends how he looks at it.
I'm thinking, what would he be more likely to achieve more, win more prize money? Yeah. But I mean, obviously they can do whatever they want. But I'd prefer you to do that. Thank you. Let's talk about Saturday. Extraordinary start to the day in the novices chase, won by Mirabad. A first Grade 1 win for Tristan Darl, who was over the moon, as you can imagine. But beating Salvatore Mundi, again, I'll say I'm not a huge fan of Salvatore Mundi for whatever reason, especially over fences. So I'm not sure about the strength of the form, obviously. But a big day for Tristan Darl, most importantly. Yeah,
and rode him brilliantly. Lots of patience, changing tactics from how he's been ridden previously. You've just got to feel sorry for people, including myself, that backed him for a Greatwood hurdle off a mark of 129 earlier this season, went off 7-2. 2 wins over fences have come at 14-1 and 50-1, and 2 defeats at 1-4 and 5-2. Was beaten 31 lengths by Titan Discovery at Bangor in February. I think that rival off 131 might be interesting next season. Obviously, you can't take it literally, but yeah, it was an interesting race to watch, and the eye was always drawn to Mirabad through the race. But if you're asking me if I see any of these as champion chasers next year, it would be a no, albeit that Carla Conti obviously was catching the eye when she fell 3 out. It would be interesting to see what she does, because
I didn't think she was travelling early in the race, but then she picked up the bridle, didn't she, turn in? Because I thought she was, with just under a circuit to go. I thought she looked like she was in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, the way that she was staying on, I think should have been able to put him up to it.
Yeah. Do you give any value to this race as a guy?
I thought Salvatore Mundi done a lot wrong. He was keen, didn't jump great, went too hard, and I think he kind of. My initial view was Mirabad kind of fell in almost. The race just fell into his lap a little bit, but the handicapper I was taking the literally today, he's gone up 17 pounds to a mark of 155, so might be a little bit difficult to place to say. I was actually at Bangor when he was beaten in at 1-4 in that 3-runner race last time, so I certainly, when I seen him trailing in that day, I wasn't expecting him to turn up and win the Maghull a couple of weeks later.
The Mersey novices hurdle went the way of Bossman Jack, who beat Soldier Reeves. I mean, my eye was drawn to Lord Byron, who I thought finished off the race really well and is one to look out for. I'm not entirely certain that he got the best ride in the race, but what did you make of that contest?
Yeah, I thought the best horse won. He was one of my horses to follow at the start of the season. Actually, I'll let Steve elaborate when he talks on me. He put him up when I was in at the start of the season as one of his 3 horses to follow. Travelled really well. I think it was obviously would have finished closer at Cheltenham, but for that mistake at the last. And that was a huge step forward, really, because Dan had kept him away from graded races prior to Cheltenham, which to take that step up and run so well, I was a little bit surprised, but it was good to see him back it up and then go and do it. And I thought, talking about compliments being paid, he paid a handsome compliment to Crystal Destraval, who beat him and Baron Noir in a good novice or maiden hurdle early season at Warwick. I would imagine, looking at Bossman Jack's physique, he will go chasing. I'd just say, I know you might call the price up in a minute for the Broadway. I think he's fairly prominent. I just don't know whether he won 3 miles just yet. He's obviously his half brother to Gidley Park, and he races a little bit, maybe not as exuberantly as Gidley Park, but he's got a good way of going. So I would imagine that he'll start off over an intermediate trip and maybe returning to Aintree for the Manifesto would be the option in 2027.
All right. For the Brown Advisor, you were saying for
sorry, I keep it the old.
Sorry, 14s at the moment with Bet365. Yeah. What did you make of the race?
Yeah, really impressive. I think the most impressive part of it was the distance between himself and Soldier Reeves at the last, because jumping in the last hurdle, you thought there might actually be a bit of a race on, and he just sprints clear. And yeah, he's a really exciting horse going forward. I know Dan mentioned that he could be a Gold Cup horse in the future if he's got one in the yard, and you wouldn't disagree with that, really. I thought Soldier Reeves could probably be upgraded as well. He's a young horse. He's 33-1 for the Stayers. I know we've put up a few for the Stayers hurdle, but horses like him and Zeus Power, I think I prefer to be back in for Stayers hurdles rather than the New Line at around 8-1.
Okay. But would you prefer to back them against Home by the Lee? What a horse he's proven. Obviously won the Stayers hurdle, follows up with victory at Aintree, and I thought he won really well. He was running away from Take No Chances late on. He's 16-1 for the Stayers hurdle next season. As you've put in the notes here, Steve, he'll be 12. But what a horse he is.
I mean, his last 2 performances have been career bests on figures. Won his last 3. You just need to point him towards the stables and he takes off.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a really clever ride by JJ Slevin. I know it's easy to say about a winning ride, but he needed to make sure that it was enough of a stamina test, but he's also riding a horse that doesn't do a lot in front. So he kind of has to kid the other jockeys along in order to come round him, in order to keep Home by the Lee coming. So yeah, he must be a nightmare of a horse to ride. But in fairness to him, he still found after the last on his way back to his stables, and yeah, just remarkable, the transformation of him at the age of 11. Yeah,
when you watch the race again, every time, as Steve said, every time something left him in front, he pricked his ears, something came to him, he's gone again. Actually, there's so much to admire and enjoy about Home by the Lee, isn't there?
Yeah, it's just probably the epitome of national hunt racing, really, when you get a horse of his age still putting up those, like Steve said, career bests almost. Yet I couldn't have given him a chance at Cheltenham, and I thought he'd have struggled again here, to be honest. So, as you say, you kept thinking horses were travelling up, looking like they were going to challenge. Actually, with those in behind, I thought beating the best part of 25 lengths, Ruth Jefferson's La Vida Adiva's probably one to note, because she travelled up really well on the wide outside. I know eventually she faded late on, but given that she's only rated 136, I thought that was the way she travelled into the race suggests she's still possibly on the up. She'd run well at Cheltenham as well. So, but I was a little bit disappointed with Honesty Policy, I think, again in third. I don't think he races again like a stayer almost. He does a little bit too much in his races, I think. So maybe he's one who'll come back in triple again. He's only 6, so there's talk of him, I would imagine, possibly going chasing next season as well.
So that's a look at the main races from the Aintree Festival. What else would you like to mention? I presume someone's going to mention the ease in which Henry Crowe had aboard Barton Snow in the old Fox Hunters.
Yeah, I've got a few down. Just to mention, Barton Snow was top of the list. Obviously, he was hugely impressive. Interesting this morning, the handicap has put him up £1, so he's 146 if the temptation is ever there to go back under regulation racing. I don't know if that is a possibility or anything. I thought Let's Go champ Bramwell, to be fair, in second. I know he was beaten well in the end, but the way he moved into the race, and he came from, I thought, an unpromising position where most horses were more to the fore, and he came from a long way back. So I'd mark his effort up. The Red Rum, I thought Highland's Legacy, I wouldn't say he was unlucky in losing. I thought, I actually backed Highland's Legacy and thought Ryan's Rocket would have beaten him anyway, but I still think he would have finished closer. He made a fairly serious error down the back as well. I think it was the last open ditch as well as the final fence. But I thought, if you're being critical slightly, he was sat a fraction too close to a strong pace, and in the end that caught him out as much as the jumping issues. But I still think he's progressing over fences. He's much better chaser than he was hurdling. He's gone up another 4 today for 137. I'd be surprised if he can't win a nice race next year. Steve touched on the great week that Dan Skelton had. He obviously done the grade 2 bumper double with Nan's Choice. She travelled really well in 2 bumpers on bad ground in Ireland, proved the versatility there. So obviously want to note in Mares Novice Hurdles going forward, and Fourth Factor won the Weatherby's sponsored race on Saturday. A first graded race success for Heidi Palin. But I just thought it was noticeable that, again, when you're talking about the strength and depth, and possibly if I'm in at the start of next season, we'll be talking a lot about Dan's Novice Hurdles again. You'll talk about some of them. The filly who finished second in the champion bumper, and obviously Nan's Choice to go down the mare's route. Just a couple of others to name who I've been impressed with recently. Rattling Home finished second in a good race at Kempton. Merlin Allen actually franked that form by running well on Saturday. And before that, he'd beaten the Morn Rambler in a point-to-point who won the champion bumper. So he's obviously high up. A couple of other recent winners who impressed. Samwell won under Heidi Palin during Festival Week. He looked good. St James's Finest won at the Winter Millions Festival. So you're already looking at the conveyor belt still coming through, which is something. I'm probably the biggest eye catcher for me in the lesser races. Somewhat was Dan Skelton trained. Harry Lowe was in the boys race on Friday. He finished third again. Came from a long way back, and I thought he made an untimely error as well. The first flight up the home straight. He's gone up £4 today to a mark of 128. Again, I think probably go chasing. He beat Mighty Park in his point-to-point as well. So obviously got a good deal of form. And when we get on to what's coming up this week, I'll touch on his form again.
Okay, yeah, Harry Lowe's was hugely eye-catching in the JP colours, running into third spot late on. Anything else for you, Steve?
No, I think Paul's covered it perfectly.
Okay, lovely. I'd love to see what Barton Snow would do were he to be
Paddy Power off on 4-6.
Focused on that. It'd be quite interesting, wouldn't it? I'd also love to see Henry Crowe get a go on him as well. His face after he won at the Fox Hunters at Aintree was something else. Okay, that has been this week's Racing Recap. Now, before we get into our weekend preview, just to let you know that our sponsor, Bet365, have a best odds guaranteed offer. It's available on every single UK and Irish race from 8 AM on the day of the race. If you take a price and the SP is bigger, Bet365 will pay you at the bigger odds. Full T's and C's can be found on the website. And time to look ahead now to the big racing this weekend, and the Scottish Grand National is the main focus of attention at Ayr, for which King of Answers is 5-1 after that excellent run at Cheltenham. Kim Rock is 6-1, Road to Home 7, J'Arrive de l'Est 8-1, Quebecois 8-1. He's also got an entry in the handicap chase elsewhere. Ask Brewster 10s, Isaac de Zobo 10s, Montregard 10s, and 12-1 bar those. Where would you like to start here, Paul?
I think obviously we just touched on King of Answers. I thought, I'm not saying he was flattered by the result of Cheltenham, but he did come from a long way off the pace and run on through beaten horses. That would suggest to a lot of people that stepping up again further in distance should suit. I was slightly surprised. Actually, one more who I could have touched on in the recap, I thought ran reasonably well for Lucinda and Michael, was Jet to Vegas in the 2.5 mile handicap. I think he ran better than his finishing position. He was dropped a pound today, but I thought it was quite noticeable that they only had 4 runners over the week. I don't know whether that was by design or anything, but they haven't possibly been in the same form as you might expect in recent times. So King of Ants, I thought up £3 to a mark of 143. I thought was high enough, to be honest. I actually thought he was too high before the National and Chase. He wasn't really on my shortlist for that. So I'd probably be looking elsewhere. I thought Quebecois was an obvious one based on his really good run in the Ultimate. Obviously that form has been frank. Blow Your Wad came out and won, and Johnny, who ran well obviously in the National. Yeah. So that was a solid run. He won at this fixture last year, beating Jump Allen, who was probably most people's biggest eye catcher of the festival in the mountain pipe. So that form worked out well again. He was well weighted until yesterday with confirmation stage, and everything towards the top came out. So now he's right up the top of the weights. You say he's entered in a novice handicap as well, but I would expect him to run here. I think conditions will suit. The other one, I had 2 on my shortlist, and he was actually taken out. Havela, he only won on Easter Monday, he won the at Plumpton. So I assume he's waiting an extra week for next week's Bet365 Gold Cup. So by process of elimination, it'd be Quebecois for me.
Okay, Quebecois for Paul. 8-1 for the Scottish Grand National. Steve?
Yeah, I do like Quebecois. I was a big fan of him for the Ultimate. I think from that run in the Time Form Novices handicap chase. Yeah. For me, I like Gitmaker in this. Finished 3rd in the race in 2024, having finished 2nd behind. I know the way you're thinking in the Kim Muir. Never really found his form last season. I remember Jamie Snowden did an interview and just said they were never really happy with him at any stage in the season. Bounced back on his last 2 starts since the application of blinkers, though. Finished 5th, beaten less than 4 lengths in the Grand National Trial at Haydock in February, then finished 3rd behind Isaac Dezobo last time in the Midlands National. Both of those off a mark of 129. There was a month between a good run in the Kim Muir and this race 2 years ago. He's had the same break this year. I just thought at his price, he's probably quite a nice each-way bet.
Okay. I like Kim Rock. He was 4th in the Kim Muir. He ran well at the DRF. I haven't been entirely certain with his jumping through the season, but it's getting better and obviously going up in triple help. And I believe weather forecast is soft, good to soft in places, but there's a possibility of more rain to come. And he's obviously got form back in France before he joined Joseph O'Brien with plenty of give in the ground. So Kim Rock for me. The Scottish Champion Hurdle. This is an interesting race for a number of reasons, because there are a lot of horses that ran at Cheltenham that caught the eye, and indeed Kelso. Tell Her the Name is the 72 favourite. Charisma 5-1. Cracking Rhapsody 7-1. Ensembles à la Vie is 8s. Captain Hugo 9s. Tutti Quanti 9s, and 10-1 bar those. Tell Her the Name didn't really get going in the county behind Wilful. Wilful's 10s, by the way, for this race. Where would you like to start with Tell Her the Name or somewhere else?
We touch on the ground. The ground's going to be the important thing here, and the weather forecast is quite changeable. They could receive rain, so it is going to be quite difficult, and I think the ground is going to be really important in this race. Tell Her the Name couldn't have it fast enough, really caught the eye of many in the county hurdle. I thought was travelling well and just never really got a run late on, like many of those in there, off the same mark of 133 here. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Tutti Quanti obviously was a really impressive winner of the William Hill sponsored hurdle at Newbury in February. Off the back of that was supplemented for the Champion Hurdle. So if the rain arrives, it's more suiting Tutti Quanti. If it doesn't arrive, it will suit more Tell Her the Name. But I thought the rock solid one was Cracking Rhapsody, to be honest. Finished 3rd in 2024, won it last year, beating Cabral de Matan by a neck off a mark of 137. Off the same mark this year, I thought ran well to finish 4th at the Cheltenham Festival as well in the county hurdle, and I thought he has least question marks about him coming into this race. So yeah, again, there's another one at around 7-1 that I thought was a solid each-way option.
Okay, Cracking Rhapsody, 7-1, as Steve says, for the Scottish Champion Hurdle. What do you like, Paul?
Yeah, I actually took a look at this well in advance when the entries came out, and the 2 I liked long range were on the assumption that the ground that we normally get that we get decent ground with Tell Her the Name and Ensembles à la Vie. Obviously Tell Her the Name hasn't been particularly consistent over the years, but I thought it was an definitely an eye-catch and running the county, because from an unpromising position, wasn't well positioned at all, but still made inroads. And if you go back all the way to his novice hurdle form, he was beaten a nose by Django Bayer Ascot. I'm pretty sure you put him up when I was on the show after that for as an eye-catcher. Yeah. And then he beat Lucky Place by 14 lengths of Huntingdon. That form's really strong, I know. But I did think it was quite significant that he was Dan's only I think he was his only initial entry, so you think the firepower that they've got, it was obviously a long-term aim. Unsana Levy's, I also like since he won his bumper at Market Raising last year. He was fourth in the William Hill behind Tutti Quanti. And that form's worked out quite well since then. Obviously, Wellington Arch has won twice, Dance and Glance and Let It Rain have all won since. And I think he does really want better ground. Didn't think he could handle the conditions at Newbury. So if it does continue to dry, just at the prices, I'd lean his way. I'd give a mention to Captain Hugo as well, because he only went up £6 for the Moore Battle, which I didn't think was an overly strong renewal at the time, but Laffy came out from 5th and franked that form by winning that conditional jockeys race at Aintree on Friday. Yeah. So again, good ground suits Captain Hugo, so the rain could be significant in that.
Okay, yeah, similar. Not sure about the ground. If it was decent ground, I'd be keen on Gibbs Island at 14 to 1. Was alongside Tell Her the Name at Cheltenham, held out. He's obviously had issues being too keen. When he won at Chepstow, he looked like he was really progressive, went up in the handicap, went to the Greatwood behind Alexi, too keen, disappointed. And it's been a slow burner trying to get him back on track, but credit to Tom Lacey, who ran much better in the county. And he and Tell Her the Name are both at the back, and he actually got carved up by Carbo in the home straight and had a fair bit of ground to make up as well as Tell Her the Name. And he's also gone forward. He's 14 to 1. Tell Her the Name is also, 7 to 2 favourite. So I thought it was a bit of discrepancy there. But I'm worried about the ground. And if the ground is soft, then I'm keen on Tutti Quanti to be given another go out in front. That's the Scottish Champion Hurdle. Is there anything else running this week that you'd want to throw in the mix? I mean, some good flat racing as well this week. Yeah,
I'm going to leave the jump stuff for Paul on that side and concentrate on Newmarket, really. The Earl of Sefton on Wednesday, I like Boiling Point. He's actually rated £1 inferior to Demisis, but is in receipt of £3. Also has the benefit of race fitness over that rival. Demisis is returning from 186 days off the track. Boiling Point ran well to finish 4th in the Winter Derby on the all-weather. That's a surface that is 0 from 2 on. Now returns back to a course and distance that he obviously won the Cambridgeshire on his final start of last season, so I thought Boiling Point was probably the one to beat in that, and he is second favourite behind Demisis. In the Dewhurst, Hankelo has been declared for Carberk. No. Yes, sorry, the Craven. Yeah. Getting ahead of myself.
So excited.
In the colours of Sheikh Mohammed Obeid, made an impressive win at York before finishing a nose second at Doncaster. Won the Group 3 Autumn Stakes on his final start last season. That's over this course and distance. And looking at him as a physical, he's definitely going to improve from 2 to 3. And then lastly, at Newmarket on Thursday, the 4:45 is a novice race that's confined to horses that have only ran once. Guildmaster, I was really impressed with for Gosden's, Rab Havlin and Godolphin. Was one of these back-end 2-year-olds, won on the all-weather on the 22nd of December. Was sent off 13 to 8 that day, won by 3 lengths over a mile. Yeah. And I thought he's definitely going to be a horse that could be running in classics by the end of the season.
Well, Guildmaster, a name to look out for later this week. Steve, thank you for now. Paul, anything else this week that you want to give a mention to?
Yeah, just scoot through a couple tomorrow. Obviously, Haydock Stage is a decent card. Picked up the races that were lost, or some of the races that were lost from Cheltenham's
White Noise is running, isn't she?
She is, She's running the Mares Novice Hurdle. The one I like there in the 5:35, the last race, is Count of Vendôme. He bumped into Harry Lowe's the time before at Bangor, ran well against him, then came out and won again at Doncaster. I've been waiting for him to go into a handicap because I think a strong pace would suit. He was actually declared for the conditional jockeys race at Aintree, but missed the cut, being rated only 118. So he goes a Haydock tomorrow, so hopefully the ground will be good there for him. On Friday, more of a race to watch up at Ayr. Came from nowhere as a horse who I do think is still well handicapped on a mark of 132, despite being beaten last time by Lefremure at Newbury when he was trying to concede £4. Easily won handicaps ahead of for the Ascot before that. The one concern I would have is that Jeremy Scott, I was concerned for Golden Ace and the filly in the bumper at Aintree last week. He still hasn't had a winner since February. I don't think it is Jeremy Scott. So a bit of a concern about stable form there. And there is a bit of depth to that race. It's definitely a race to watch for going forward. Sanalam and Gaelic Pride have both won the last 2. Saracen Bow was particularly impressive for Nicky Richards. So taking note of that. At Ayr on Saturday in the concluding bumper. Again, Steve put up at the start of the year, key up the boards. We haven't seen him since New Year's Eve in 2024 when he bumped into No Drama This End in a bumper at Warwick, which looked a good run at the time. And his point-to-point form has worked out really well because he beat Fortune de Mer, who was a Grade 2 winner over hurdles and now rated 134. it looks like he's going to go up there for the Skeletons. Harry's already jocked up, so probably take a bit of beating. There's a couple of others to note there. Hidden Mountain was impressive at Hunting on his first off. Kim Bailey and Matt Nichols didn't declare at Aintree last week, so probably wants a bit of soft ground. And Old Habits for Ollie Murphy, he was good at Southall, although he's entered the maiden hurdle on Friday as well, which would be an unusual time of year to run in a maiden hurdle. Would have thought, so I'd prefer to see him running the bumper. So again, another race to note. And at Bangor-on-Dee on Saturday, a horse trained by Neil Mulholland, who I've been waiting for. We haven't seen him since January, called Bel Ombre. He won on handicap debut at Taunton, and the third, fourth and fifth have all won since. He's gone up £10, still only rated 108. But he was a horse who caught my own bumpers last year, so I think he's definitely, whether he turns up there or whether before the end of the season, I think he can win again and probably want to follow into next season in novice handicap chases.
Okay, comprehensive list. I'm just going to, as you did flat, you did jumps, I'm going to bring the two worlds together with a look at the John Porter. Constitution Hill lining up, potentially, because the ground might be an issue for him. Convergent, though, is the favourite for that race. I think Convergent will take the world of beating Constitution Hill or no Constitution Hill. This horse was second in the German Derby, progressed after that, won Leopardstown, won in France, beat Dubai Honour there. I think you can put a line through his last run of the season. He's 3-1 for that race, the John Porter, the finest surprise stakes, whatever you want to call it. And Constitution Hill's 4-1. There's a bit of a gap between them, I think, but at least for Constitution Hill to prove. And obviously there's a host of good racing. The Spring Cup, I'll be cheering on Rogue Diplomat for the team on Saturday. So those are just a couple more to add into the mix for our horses coming up this weekend. Now, before we get into our best bets of the weekend, just to let you know of a free-to-play 6 horses challenge. It's available every weekend with free spins on offer if you get 2 or 3 selections correct. And the prize pools are also available for 5 and 4 correct predictions, as well as the jackpot for all 6. T's and C's apply. So it's time for the best bets of the weekend. Paul, what have you gone for?
I'm going to actually go for one tomorrow, if that's all right, because
Please.
On previous visits I have an uncanny knack of selecting horses who don't get declared, so I'll go for another Haydock. In the 3:15, Le Tiep Sacre, I hope I've pronounced that right, for Gary and Josh Moore. Reappeared, a belated reappearance recently at Kempton and was an eye catcher in 5th. He'd been off for 373 days last year. He had a similar profile. He had a bit of a gap before his British debut, finished 2nd and then won a Fontwell when he beat a horse called Walk on High, who won his next 3 starts. I think a mark of 118, looks more than fair. I did think he might go chasing this year, but obviously with that belated reappearance, I think that'll be on hold till next year, but he won't have any issues with the ground. I think the track should suit because he's a smooth traveller. The stable are in good form. Bet365 haven't priced the race up
Not yet, no.
But he opened up 10-1 with one firm yesterday, and he's still available around 17-2, so hopefully he'll be best industry price for Bet365 when they open later.
That's Haydock on Wednesday, the 3:15 Le Tiep Sacre for Paul. Steve?
Yeah, I'm going to Newbury on Saturday. I'm going for Tulane in the Fred Darling, the Dubai Duty Free, currently available at 13-8 with Bet365. Won over the course and distance on debut, then beat Xanthos at Leicester. Now, that rival reversed the form in the Rockfell Stakes at Newmarket, but I just never thought she looked happy during that race. It was either the track or just something physically wrong, but she's been strong in the market for the 1,000 guineas recently. I thought it was really interesting the fact that they're coming to this race rather than the Nell Gwyn at Newmarket. So Tulane for me to bounce back in the Fred Darling on Saturday.
Tulane is 13-8 for the Fred Darling on Saturday, or the Dubai Duty Free Stakes with Bet365. And I'm going to Newbury on Saturday for Convergent in the John Porter. Constitution Hill's going to, if he runs, going to make most of the market up because I think he'll be over bet. But I think Convergent sets a very high standard. 2nd in the German Derby. He was progressive even after that. Beat Dubai Honour in France at Longchamp at the back end of last season. You could put a line through his last run. I think he's rated officially 116. So he sets quite a high bar for Constitution Hill to aim for. He's trained by Carl Burke. He's not going to be far off peak fitness coming back. So I think that he will win that race and perhaps put a blow in all the lofty hopes for Constitution Hill. Who knows? I do like Constitution Hill, just in case anybody says otherwise. But I think Convergence sets a very high standard in that race. So just to recap, Paul has gone for Le Tierp Sacre on Wednesday at Haydock, and on Saturday, Steve's going for Tulane in the old Fred Darling, and I'm going for Convergent in the old John Porter. And those are our 3 selections for the weekend. Paul, are you out and about? Are you heading to the races at all?
I might go to Bangor on Saturday, yeah, because Everton and Liverpool's on Sunday this week, so obviously I've got a day off on to get ready for that one.
Is that the first one at the new stadium, isn't it? The first Merseyside derby?
It is, yeah.
Exciting times, some big matches in the Premier League this weekend. Steve, what about you? You were at Leicester earlier this week, weren't you?
I was at Leicester yesterday. I'm going to head to Newmarket later on today to look at Talk of New York and see if a Hood settles him, and then I'll be at Newmarket tomorrow just as a punter.
Okay, I'll be watching from the studio the rest of the week. That is it for this episode of Racing Weekly, brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. Thanks to Steve and to Paul for joining me on the show. As always, if you like what you heard or watched in this or any of our previous episodes, then leave us a kind, nice review on Apple Podcasts or in the comments section on YouTube. We are back in a couple of weeks' time to preview the Bet365 Jumps Finale card, which is coming up at Sandown. But for now, bye-bye.